The Trump tariffs were supposed to be the economic superhero move, swooping in to protect American workers and make U.S. industries mighty again. Instead, it's like hiring a bodyguard who ends up punching you in the face. Rather than strengthening American companies, the tariffs have drained them, hiking their costs, squeezing profits, and leaving them gasping to compete, not only with China, but pretty much everyone else. 7 months into the biggest tariff hike since the 1930s, the average shopper hasn't felt the full sting yet, but businesses definitely have. Factories are coughing up more for raw materials, construction projects are freezing mid-blueprint, and supply chains look like a tangled bowl of spaghetti. And yet, oddly enough, the economy hasn't fallen off a cliff. Growth? Sluggish? Collapse? Not yet. So what's going on here? Were all those economists who predicted doom just crying wolf? Or are we in the middle of a slow-motion train wreck that's quietly rewriting the rules of global trade? When Donald Trump first dropped his tariff bombshell last spring, the world gasped. Economists warned of disaster, the media went into meltdown mode, and investors braced for a crash that never came. For a few jittery weeks, markets trembled, the dollar stumbled, and every headline screamed, "Trade war incoming." But then, nothing exploded. Unemployment stayed low, Wall Street stopped panicking, and life went on. Behind the fiery speeches and America First slogans, the White House was quietly handing out exceptions like backstage passes at a concert. Allies got exemptions, industries got thresholds, and entire sectors, from pharma to farm gear, got discreet get-out-of-tariff-free cards. On paper, it looked like America had gone full protectionist. In reality, it was a patchwork mess. Chaotic, inconsistent, and full of loopholes you could drive a cargo ship through. The official tariff rate was sky high, but when economists checked the actual cash collected at customs, it was more like a drizzle than a downpour. Why? Because businesses did what businesses always do when the rules change. They adapted. Importers rerouted goods through friendlier countries, corporations hired lawyers to negotiate exclusions, and lobbyists got busy carving out special circumstances. What was pitched as a bold new economic revolution ended up looking more like a game of whack-a-mole. Still, even watered-down tariffs left their mark. They gummed up supply chains, complicated planning, and created a two-tiered economy, one where big, well-connected companies managed to stay afloat while smaller firms got dragged under. And when economists crunched the numbers, the results were brutal. Roughly half of all tariff costs, 51% to be exact, were being swallowed by American businesses themselves. That means manufacturers, importers, and small retailers were taking the hit straight to the gut. They didn't raise prices, not because they were feeling generous, but because they couldn't afford to scare off customers. So margins shrank, profits thinned, and everyone smiled through the pain, hoping it would all blow over soon. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Months later, the temporary pain still lingers, invisible but growing. Economists are already warning that quiet pressure doesn't just vanish. It builds up, waiting to explode as inflation later on. The last time this happened, about 80% of those tariff costs eventually trickled down to consumers. Translation: enjoy the calm. It's just the prelude to the price hikes. We're already seeing hints of it. Prices are inching upward, feeding the sticky inflation haunting the post-pandemic recovery. And while Washington debates theory, the real struggle is happening far from Capitol Hill, in places like Kentucky. Yes, Kentucky. Known for bourbon, bluegrass, and fast horses, not exactly the epicenter of global manufacturing. Yet it's one of America's biggest vehicle production hubs. Governor Andy Beshear didn't mince words when he called the tariffs the worst economic policy of my lifetime. Factories are delaying projects, construction costs are whiplashing week by week, and one major development had to be shelved because planners couldn't even estimate the cost within $300 million. Imagine trying to budget when steel prices change faster than TikTok trends. Business leaders, of course, are keeping their lips sealed. Criticizing Trump's trade policy publicly could invite political backlash, or worse, a sudden regulatory headache. So they suffer in silence, cutting jobs quietly, moving production discreetly, doing whatever it takes to survive. Behind all the Made in America talk, the reality is far less glamorous. Many manufacturers are just trying to stay in America. And here's the kicker. Once tariffs go up, they almost never come down. Economists call it the tariff trap. Industries grow comfortable behind those protective walls, lobbying to keep them up forever. The government, meanwhile, gets addicted to the easy revenue. Even a modest 10% tariff can pour billions into federal coffers, an awfully tempting substitute for raising taxes. Without the old trade frameworks that once kept things predictable, tariffs can now hit anyone, anywhere. Brazil this week, India next, maybe China again after lunch. There's no pattern, no stability, just a game of global roulette. One economist dubbed it trade policy without an anchor, a phrase that perfectly captures the current chaos. Because when businesses can't predict their costs, they can't plan. And when they can't plan, they stop investing. That's how economies slow. Not with a dramatic crash, but with hesitation. And that's exactly what's happening now. In the first half of this year, U.S. growth crawled at 1.1%. Strip out the pandemic years, and you'd have to go all the way back to 2012 to find growth that weak. America hasn't hit the wall yet, but you can almost hear the brakes squealing. It's not a recession, but it sure doesn't feel healthy either. Economists say the current slowdown lines up almost perfectly with what you'd expect if only half of Trump's promised tariffs were actually put in place. In other words, the economy may have dodged the heart attack, but it's still dealing with chronic fatigue. Inflation's still hanging around like that one guest who refuses to leave the party. Businesses are tightening their wallets, and consumers? They're not exactly in a spending mood. This isn't the catastrophe we were warned about. No flames, no crash, no screaming headlines. It's quieter than that. What we're watching is slow erosion, the kind that eats away at potential growth bit by bit. The cost of protectionism isn't a shattered skyline. It's the opportunities that never happen, the factories that don't expand, the startups that never get funded, the ideas that never get born. That's the real damage. Invisible, silent, but painfully real. And here's what's even stranger. The rest of the world hasn't fired back. Normally, trade wars come with fireworks. Back in the day, America's protectionist moves triggered instant retaliation. Remember Smoot-Hawley in the 1930s? Total global chaos. This time, though, crickets. Europe's playing it cool, China's staying measured, and everyone else is just moving on. They're trading with each other instead. While the US is busy building economic walls, the rest of the world is busy building bridges. Economists even have a name for it, the Fortress America effect. On the outside, it looks powerful and independent, a self-sufficient superpower. But over time, that fortress starts to feel more like a cage. The world adapts, new supply chains form, and suddenly, the country that once designed the global economy is now watching from the sidelines. That's not protection. That's retreat dressed up as strength. And the irony? Tariffs haven't just reshaped the economy, they've flipped the entire political map. For decades, Republicans were the champions of free trade, waving the Reagan and NAFTA flags while Democrats, backed by unions, pushed back. Fast forward to now, and it's the Republicans calling tariffs patriotic, and Democrats defending global trade. Talk about a plot twist. Even if Democrats take power tomorrow, undoing these tariffs won't be simple. Too many industries now rely on them for protection. And let's not forget Uncle Sam's newfound addiction, those juicy tariff revenues. Tens of billions a year rolling into government coffers? That's a hard habit to break, especially when nobody wants to raise taxes. So here we are, inching toward a future where tariffs aren't emergency measures anymore, but the new normal. A permanent protectionism, baked right into the system. And that's the real danger. Not the immediate hit, but the slow corrosion that follows. Tariffs dull competition. They sap innovation. They make businesses lazy, not overnight, but gradually until one day the spark's just gone. And perhaps most dangerously, they erode trust. America's allies, the ones who used to count on stability and fairness, Now see unpredictability. Every trade deal starts to feel like a roll of the dice. Will tariffs rise again next month? Will an exemption disappear overnight? No one knows. Moyanwad uncertainty is poison for business. Meanwhile, other regions, Europe, Asia, Latin America, are signing new trade pacts that don't include the United States. They're connecting faster, integrating deeper, and lowering barriers. The global economy is moving on, and with or without America. So, were the critics wrong about Trump's tariffs? Not really. They were just early. The damage didn't hit like a thunderclap. It's seeping in like water through cracks in a wall. Instead of collapse, we got drag. Instead of an explosion, we got erosion. American businesses are paying the price now. Consumers will feel it next. And the nation that once built the global trade order is quietly dismantling it, piece by piece. The tariffs didn't make America stronger, they handcuffed it. They turned uncertainty into a constant and competitiveness into a question mark. And maybe that's the scariest part, because once walls go up, whether they're economic, political, or psychological, history tells us they almost never come down. The Trump tariffs weren't just a policy, they were a turning point. A signal to the world that the United States, the same country that built the free market playbook, can just as easily tear out the pages. And inside this new fortress, American businesses aren't thriving. They're holding their breath, waiting for a way out. Because protection doesn't always protect. Sometimes it isolates, and when the walls grow too high, even the mightiest economy can end up trapped inside. So maybe this isn't the end of the story, maybe it's the warning shot. What happens next? That's up to all of us. Hit subscribe. Drop a like. Share your thoughts in the comments because your voice matters more than you think.